Welcome back to Dark Blood's Garage. In the last video, we disassembled the top end of this 305. I also did a quick visual on all the internals, and I had a look at the head just to make sure that there wasn't any obvious severe damage. In this video, we're going to disassemble the rest of the bottom end, starting with the harmonic balancer. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to try and wedge this crank to prevent it from rotating. And you're going to use the wooden end of a hammer or something like that. Don't use anything steel, and that will prevent any damage. A good sign that your oil pump is not screwed up is often if you have a really bad motor, you're going to see some metal built up in here. I didn't see any of that, so this motor is actually in really good shape. The oil pan was also really clean when I pulled everything off. It has your typical water, a little bit of moisture built up in the oil, but it's nothing to be entirely alarmed of. So the next thing we're going to do here is remove the pistons. So the idea behind this is you want to kind of have the rod as parallel with the bore as possible. This way, when it cracks loose and it comes down, it'll come straight out the bore. So you're going to remove both these nuts, and you're going to lightly tap both of these studs evenly until it completely breaks loose of the rod cap. Once you remove the actual cap over here, you're going to want to slide this rod down gently and try to avoid the stud scraping the journals. You don't want to scratch this. If you scratch this crank, you're basically now left having to either repolish it or possibly have to turn it down or get another crank. And so that can be really, really costly. So this has to be done with a lot of care and a lot of patience. That's basically what the bearings look like right now. And now we can go ahead, and I usually use a pry bar, or if I have a long rod of some sort, then I can go ahead and go underneath the piston and just smack it. And now that you're clear of the crank, you can basically smack the piston from above through the bore. And we're free. While sliding the piston assembly out, just be cautious not to scratch the bores. So once you remove all of these pistons, it's a good idea to keep them all in the exact same order on an organizer tray of some sort, just so when you go back to reassemble, you can go ahead and put them all back in their corresponding bores. If you're getting a new block and you're going to bore and hone and balance and everything, then that doesn't really matter. But if you're going to pull this all apart just to re-ring it, re-bearing it, and so forth, it's best practice to keep them all in the exact same order that you've pulled them all out in. So now that all the pistons are out, in order to remove this crankshaft, we basically have to remove the front timing cover and we have to remove the single piece rear main seal. The mistake I made here is that this is a single piece rear main seal, not a 2-piece rear main seal. So I'm actually supposed to remove this before I mount it to the stand. So we're gonna go ahead here and remove the timing chain. We're gonna go ahead and remove these 3 bolts for the camshaft. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and remove the camshaft. The way you wanna remove this camshaft, obviously you wanna be really careful because you don't want the camshaft to come out at any weird angles, because any weird angles is going to damage the bearings inside of the block or possibly damage the camshaft itself. So you basically got to pull this out and keep it as perfectly straight with all of the bearings inside of the block. The way to do this, you basically put the timing chain sprocket back on. That's the part number for the camshaft. So now that we're ready to pull off the crank, we're going to go ahead and crack all the bolts first, and then we're going to use the gun to just pull them all off. Now for removing the crank, you don't want to lift it up from one end or lift it up from the other. You want to pull this out as evenly as possible, and you also want to remove this as perpendicular to the block as you possibly can. And that pretty much concludes the disassembly portion of this project. All the internals are going to be washed and inspected to make sure that they're all within tolerance. In the next video, we're going to begin the reassembly of this project, so stay tuned for that.